Look at her. Does she think someone like that can sit with us playing chess? The entire hall stopped. Everyone turned their heads at the same time. The luxury hotel's chess tournament was on break, and Mariana had just sat down in one of the empty chairs in the VIP area. Her fingers touched the edge of the marble board. That was it. She hadn't grabbed anything, hadn't talked to anyone. Sheikh Yusuf Rahman was standing next to her table. Long Arab robe, gold watch on his wrist, ruby ring on his finger. He didn't shout, didn't need to. His voice came out steady, loud enough for everyone to hear, low enough to sound like he was just stating a fact. Before we begin, write your name and where in the world you are watching from in the comments below. The waiters stopped serving champagne. Two women in long dresses stepped away. Quietly, a man in a bow tie coughed and looked at the floor. Nobody said anything. Nobody needed to say anything. Mariana tried to get up, but her legs didn't respond right away. The chair scraped the tile floor. The noise seemed too loud. She held the edge of the table to balance herself, and that's when she saw it. Her nails were dirty, her hands cracked, the sleeve of her old coat was frayed at the end. Security! Yusuf didn't look at her. He looked at the hall. Someone let this woman in. I want to know who it was. Two security guards appeared from the other side of the hall. Black uniforms, walkie-talkies on their belts. They didn't run. They walked slowly, like people who know nobody's going to run away. Mariana took 2 steps back. Her old backpack hit the chair and almost fell. She grabbed the strap with both hands. Inside was everything she owned: a change of clothes, a half-empty water bottle, a book without a cover, and a box of blood pressure pills she didn't take because she had forgotten to ask for a new prescription at the clinic. I just wanted to watch the tournament. Mariana spoke quietly. So quietly, it barely came out. Watch. Yusuf smiled. It wasn't an angry smile. It was worse. It was a smile from someone who finds it funny. You don't even know what chess is. I bet you've never seen a real board in your life. But people stopped to look. A group of 5 businessmen came closer, glasses in hand, curious. A woman with her hair pulled back took her phone out of her pocket and pointed it at Mariana. She didn't film, just held it there, ready to film if something happened. The security guards were 10 feet away. Wait, Yusuf raised his hand. The guards stopped. He looked at Mariana from top to bottom, like someone checking a broken object. Do you know how to play chess? Mariana didn't answer. Her heart was beating too fast. Her mouth was dry. I asked if you know how to play. Yusuf crossed his arms. Yes, Mariana whispered. The word came out so quietly that several people leaned forward to hear. Yusuf laughed. A sharp, cutting sound that made the crystal glasses ring. Perfect. Then let's have some fun. He gestured to the ornate chess set between them. You want to sit at my table? Fine, play me. The crowd pressed closer. Someone held up a phone to record. Mariana could smell expensive perfumes mixing with the leather of designer shoes. Her own clothes felt rough against her skin. If you win, Yusuf announced to the room, I'll give you a house. A real house with walls and a roof. More laughter rippled through the spectators. But when you lose, you leave through the back door and never come near this hotel again. Mariana's hands trembled as she reached for the white pieces. The marble felt cold and smooth, heavy. She moved her king's pawn forward 2 squares. A basic opening. Safe. Yusuf barely glanced at the board before mirroring her move. He turned to a woman in diamonds standing beside him. Did you see the new yacht Marina bought? 60 feet of pure excess. The woman giggled. She invited us for next weekend. The weather should be perfect. Mariana developed her knight, a textbook move that any beginner would make after reading a chess book. She kept her eyes down, studying the pieces while conversations flowed around her. Yusuf moved his knight without looking, still talking. The helicopter pad alone cost more than most people make in a year. He sipped his champagne. Some people just understand how to live properly. The insult hit its target. Mariana felt heat rise in her cheeks. She castled kingside, another standard move. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would reveal her true knowledge of the game. Look how she holds the pieces, someone whispered behind her, like she's afraid they'll break. Poor thing probably learned from a library book. This is cruel, even for Yusuf. But Yusuf was enjoying himself. He moved his bishop aggressively, attacking her knight. A decent move, but impatient. Typical of someone who relied on intimidation more than skill. Mariana retreated her knight to safety. She could feel eyes watching her every move now. The conversations had died down. People were paying attention. She studied the position for 30 seconds before advancing her center pawn. The move looked simple, but it opened lines for her pieces. Control of the center. Basic strategy that most casual players missed. Yusuf finally looked at the board properly. His forehead creased slightly. The move wasn't what he'd expected from a homeless woman playing her first serious game. Interesting, he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. He pushed his queen out early, trying to create immediate threats. It was a mistake. The kind of move that worked against weak players, but left the queen exposed against anyone who understood tactics. Mariana didn't punish it immediately. Instead, she developed another piece calmly. Her rook found the open file she'd created with her pawn move. The pieces were starting to work together. She's not playing like a beginner, someone said quietly. Look at her posture. She's thinking 3 moves ahead. Who is she? Yusuf heard the whispers. His jaw tightened. He'd expected this to be over in 10 minutes with a humiliating checkmate. Instead, the position was roughly equal. His queen was slightly out of place. He traded pawns in the center, trying to simplify the position. But Mariana recaptured with her bishop, and suddenly her pieces had more space. More possibilities. The crowd was definitely watching now. Phones were recording. Someone had called over the hotel manager, who stood at the edge of the circle looking nervous. Mariana's next move made several people gasp softly. She sacrificed a pawn to open her opponent's king position. Not the move of someone learning from a library book. It was sophisticated. Dangerous. Yusuf stared at the board for a full minute before taking the pawn. He had to take it. But his king was now vulnerable, and Mariana's pieces were aiming directly at it. Where did she learn to play like this? The woman in diamonds wasn't laughing anymore. This isn't amateur level, said a man in a perfectly tailored suit. Look at that pawn structure. She knows what she's doing. Yusuf's confidence was cracking. Sweat appeared on his forehead, despite the hotel's perfect air conditioning. He'd made several small mistakes, the kind that accumulated into serious problems against skilled opposition. Mariana brought her remaining knight into the attack. The pieces were coordinating beautifully now, each one supporting the others. Her homeless appearance had fooled everyone, including herself. Muscle memory was taking over. Years of study and practice that poverty couldn't erase. The position on the board told a story. White pieces working in harmony, while black scrambled to defend. It was becoming clear to everyone watching that this wasn't going to end the way Yusuf had planned. Mariana lifted her hand from the knight, hovering over the board for just a moment. The piece stood on the edge of enemy territory, protected only by a distant bishop. To any casual observer, it looked like a mistake. A free piece, waiting to be captured. "Oh dear," Yusuf chuckled, his voice carrying across the silent salon. "I believe you've blundered, my lady." He reached for his rook with theatrical confidence, ready to snatch the knight and prove his superiority. Several guests leaned forward, anticipating the quick end to this embarrassing spectacle. But Mariana's expression remained perfectly calm. "Please, take it," she said quietly. Yusuf paused, his hand still extended toward the board. Something in her tone made him look more carefully at the position. The knight was defended by nothing visible, yet she seemed almost eager for him to capture it. "What game are you really playing?" he muttered. The hotel manager stepped closer to the table, drawn by the sudden tension. Other conversations had died completely. Phones appeared as guests began recording, sensing they were witnessing something unexpected. Yusuf finally took the knight, sliding his rook across the board with a sharp click. "There. Now perhaps we can finish this quickly." Mariana's response was immediate. Her bishop swept across the diagonal, landing with deadly precision. "Check." The word fell into the silence, like a stone into still water. Yusuf's king stood exposed, caught in the open with nowhere safe to run. The knight's sacrifice had torn open his defense like paper. "How did she?" someone whispered from the crowd. Yusuf moved his king to the only available square, his earlier confidence evaporating. The position had shifted completely in a single move. Where moments before he'd felt in control, now he was scrambling to survive. Mariana brought her queen into the attack, placing it on a square that commanded the entire center of the board. The combined pressure of bishop and queen created a web that Yusuf couldn't escape. "Check again," she said simply. The crowd pressed closer. What had started as casual entertainment was becoming something else entirely. The homeless woman wasn't just playing chess, she was dismantling her opponent with surgical precision. Yusuf's hand trembled slightly as he moved his king again. "Where did you learn to play like this?" For the first time since sitting down, Mariana looked away from the board. Her eyes seemed to focus on something far beyond the luxury hotel walls, beyond the marble and crystal and wealth surrounding them. She was 8 years old again, sitting across from her grandfather in their tiny apartment. The chess set was plastic and worn, but it might as well have been made of gold. "Think 3 moves ahead, little champion," he'd whispered. "See what your opponent cannot see." The memory shifted. Age 12, standing on a stage while cameras flashed. A trophy almost as tall as she was gleamed under bright lights. The youngest state champion in history. Her parents beaming from the audience, talking about scholarships and futures. "I was different once," she said, bringing her remaining bishop into the attack. The pieces were forming a perfect storm around Yusuf's king. Another memory surfaced. Age 16, putting the chess pieces away in their box for the last time. "You can't make a living playing games," her mother had insisted. "Focus on real studies. Find a good husband. Be practical." The practical life had led to business school, then marriage to David. He'd seemed so solid, so reliable. The kind of man who wore expensive suits and made smart investments. The kind of man who could provide security. Until the day she came home to empty bank accounts and a note explaining that he'd taken everything. The house, the savings, the business they'd built together. All of it gone, along with him. "Check," Mariana said again, her queen and bishops working together like dancers in a deadly ballet. Yusuf was sweating openly now. His expensive shirt clung to his back, as he studied the board with growing desperation. Every move led to worse problems. The homeless woman had created a position so complex and threatening that escape seemed impossible. "This is impossible," he breathed. "You're just what?" Mariana's voice carried decades of pain, but also something harder. Something that had survived sleeping in doorways and searching through garbage cans. Just a woman who lost everything. The crowd had grown larger. Other games had stopped as players and spectators gathered around their table. Phones captured every moment, the video already spreading beyond the hotel walls. Yusuf tried a desperate counterattack, pushing his remaining pawns forward in hope of creating confusion. But Mariana's response was swift and merciless. She brought her rook into play, adding another attacker to the growing storm. "The thing about losing everything," she continued, moving with the fluid confidence of someone who had rediscovered their true nature, "is that it shows you what you really are underneath." Another check. Yusuf's king had nowhere left to hide. The endgame was approaching faster than anyone had imagined possible. "I was Carolina Santos Oliveira," she said, using her old tournament name for the first time in years. "Three-time state champion. I gave it up for a normal life, for security, for what people told me was important." Yusuf stared at her with new understanding. "Santos Oliveira. I remember that name from the chess magazines my father used to buy." "You should have kept reading them," Mariana replied, positioning her final piece. The trap was complete. There was nowhere left for Yusuf's king to run. The hotel salon had become completely silent, except for the soft click of chess pieces and the almost inaudible whir of phone cameras recording history. What everyone had expected to be a quick humiliation had become something else entirely. A comeback, a resurrection, a reminder that beneath society's judgments and assumptions, talent never truly dies. Yusuf's hand trembled as he reached for his king. The piece felt heavier than it should have, weighted down by the crushing reality of his position. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the hotel's perfect climate control. Around the marble chess table, the circle of spectators had grown from a handful of curious guests to nearly 50 people, all pressed close enough to witness every move. "This is impossible," he muttered under his breath, studying the board with growing panic. Every escape route had been methodically sealed off. Mariana's pieces worked together like a perfectly coordinated army, each one supporting the others in a formation that left no room for error or mercy. "Your move, SHEIK," Mariana said quietly, her voice carrying across the silent salon. Yusuf's fingers hovered over his king, searching for any square that might offer salvation. To the left, her rook commanded the entire file. To the right, her bishop cut across the diagonal like a blade. Forward meant walking directly into the path of her advancing pawn, now just 2 squares from promotion. "I need a moment to think," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Take all the time you need," Mariana replied, "but the result will be the same." A woman in diamonds leaned toward her husband. "She's absolutely destroying him," she whispered, her voice carrying more admiration than mockery now. "Look at her position. It's like watching an artist paint." Yusuf finally moved his king backward, the only square that didn't result in immediate disaster. But Mariana was already reaching for her pawn, the same piece that had been steadily marching up the board for the past 10 moves. "Promotion," she announced, removing the pawn and placing a queen in its place. The crowd drew a collective breath. 2 queens now stood on Mariana's side of the board, their combined power enough to control vast swaths of territory. Against Yusuf's lone king, they represented an overwhelming force. "Mon Dieu," breathed a French guest, pulling out his phone to record. "She has 2 queens." The clicking of phone cameras filled the air as more spectators began documenting what they were witnessing. This was no longer just a chess game. It had become something worth preserving, worth sharing, worth remembering. Yusuf stared at the board in disbelief. "How did you? When did you learn to play like this?" "I never stopped learning," Mariana said, positioning her newly promoted queen with surgical precision. "Even when I had nothing else, I had chess." The hotel manager, Carlos Mendoza, appeared at the edge of the crowd, drawn by the commotion. He was a small, efficient man who prided himself on maintaining the hotel's atmosphere of quiet luxury. Loud gatherings and spectacles were not part of the experience his guests paid premium prices to enjoy. "What's happening here?" he asked one of the nearby guests. "The homeless woman," replied a man in an expensive suit, his eyes never leaving the board. "She's beating Sheikh Rahman, completely destroying him, actually." Carlos looked more closely at the scene unfolding before him. He recognized the sheikh, of course. Yusuf Rahman was one of their most valued clients, a man who rented entire floors for business meetings and never complained about the bill. But the woman across from him was unfamiliar, dressed in clothes that had clearly seen better days. "Check," Mariana announced, moving her original queen into position. Yusuf's king had only one legal move, forced into a corner like a trapped animal. His breathing became shallow as the walls closed in around him. "This can't be happening," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "She's nobody. She's nothing." "I'm someone who knows how to play chess," Mariana corrected him, her tone remaining calm despite the venom in his words. "And right now, that's everything." A young woman with a hotel badge approached Carlos. "Sir, some of our other guests are complaining about the crowd. They're saying it's disturbing the atmosphere." Carlos looked around at the gathering. Nearly every guest in the salon had abandoned their own activities to watch the match. Conversations had stopped. Drinks sat forgotten on tables. Even the staff members who should have been working stood transfixed by what they were seeing. "No," Carlos said after a moment. "Let them watch. Something special is happening here." Yusuf made his forced move, sliding his king into the corner. The position looked hopeless from every angle, but he wasn't ready to surrender. His pride, his reputation, everything he had built his identity around was crumbling with each move. "I'll double the bet," he said suddenly, his voice carrying a note of desperation. 2 houses, 3 houses. Name your price to stop this game right here." Mariana looked up at him for the first time in several moves. Her eyes held no anger, no triumph, only a quiet determination that seemed to cut right through him. "The game continues," she said simply. "But surely we can reach some arrangement," Yusuf pressed, his voice growing louder. "This is a simple misunderstanding. I can write you a check right now for whatever amount you want." "The game," Mariana repeated, "continues." The spectators murmured their approval. This wasn't about money anymore, if it ever had been. This was about something deeper, something that couldn't be bought or negotiated away. Mariana moved her second queen, creating a battery of power that dominated the center of the board. The 2 pieces worked in perfect harmony, controlling squares, cutting off escape routes, methodically tightening the noose around Yusuf's position. "Check," she announced again. Yusuf's king was forced to move again, this time to an even worse square. His position had deteriorated from bad to hopeless to completely lost. Every option led to the same inevitable conclusion. "She's playing like a grandmaster," whispered an elderly man who had been quietly observing from the back of the crowd. "Those combinations, that technique, I haven't seen anything like it outside of professional tournaments." His companion, A woman with sharp eyes and expensive jewelry nodded in agreement. But who is she? Where did she come from? Around the salon, similar conversations were taking place in hushed tones. The guests who had initially gathered for entertainment were now witnessing something they couldn't quite categorize. This wasn't the humiliation they had expected. It was something else entirely. Yusuf's arrogance, which had seemed so natural and unshakable just an hour earlier, was cracking like a facade exposed to harsh weather. His hands shook as he reached for his king again, and his voice had lost its commanding tone. "Please," he said, the word coming out as barely more than a whisper. "We can work something out. This doesn't have to continue." "Yes," Mariana said, moving her queen into the final position. "It does." The board told the complete story now. Yusuf's king sat alone in a corner, surrounded by enemies, with no friendly pieces left to offer protection or support. Mariana's two queens commanded the battlefield like generals surveying a conquered territory. In the crowd, phones continued to record, and guests continued to call their friends. Word was spreading beyond the hotel's walls. This moment, this reversal, this impossible comeback was being shared and transmitted across networks and social circles. Carlos, the manager, found himself hoping the game would continue just a little longer. He had worked in luxury hospitality for 20 years, and he had never seen anything quite like this. It was dramatic and raw, and utterly authentic in a way that his carefully curated environment rarely allowed. But all games, even the most extraordinary ones, must eventually end. Mariana lifted her hand from the Black Queen on E7 and spoke for the first time since the game began. "Checkmate." The words fell into the salon like stones dropped into still water. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Sheikh Yusuf stared at the board, his eyes tracing the lines of attack that had closed around his king like a noose. The White Queen on D8 controlled the back rank. The Black Queen on E7 cut off any escape to the side. His king sat trapped on F8, surrounded by his own pieces that had become his prison bars. "That's impossible," someone whispered from the crowd. But it wasn't impossible. It was inevitable. Every move in the last 10 minutes had led to this moment, with mathematical certainty. Mariana had seen it coming from 20 moves away, had guided the game toward this conclusion with the patience of someone who understood that time was merely another resource to be managed. Yusuf reached out slowly, almost reverently, and tipped his king onto its side. The small click of wood against marble echoed through the silent salon. Then the applause began. It started with a single pair of hands, slow and deliberate. Carlos, the manager, standing near the bar, had begun to clap. The sound carried across the hushed space, and then another guest joined in, and another. Within seconds, the entire salon erupted in thunderous applause. People were standing now, their champagne glasses forgotten, their conversations abandoned. The same crowd that had gathered expecting to watch a spectacle of cruelty was now witnessing something entirely different. They were seeing dignity triumph over arrogance. They were seeing skill overcome prejudice. They were seeing the impossible made real. Mariana sat perfectly still as the wave of sound washed over her. She didn't smile or bow or acknowledge the applause. She simply looked at the board, at the pieces that had served her so faithfully, and allowed herself one small moment of satisfaction. Sheikh Yusuf slowly pushed back his chair and stood. His face was flushed, sweat still beading on his forehead, but something had changed in his expression. The cruel smirk was gone. The dismissive arrogance had evaporated. In its place was something that looked almost like wonder. He walked around the table until he stood beside Mariana's chair. The applause gradually faded, as people strained to hear what he might say. "I have never," he said quietly, "been so thoroughly outplayed in my entire life." He extended his hand toward her. Mariana looked up at him for a long moment, studying his face for any trace of mockery or deception. Finding none, she reached out and shook his hand. "You played with honor," she said simply. The crowd murmured its approval. Phones continued to flash and record. This moment of grace between former adversaries was being captured and shared across social media platforms in real time. Yusuf stepped back and reached into his jacket pocket for his phone. His movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial, as he scrolled through his contacts. "Mahmoud," he said when the call connected, his voice carrying clearly across the salon, "I need you to prepare a property transfer immediately. The house on Elm Street, the one with the garden. Yes, the entire property, free and clear." The crowd stirred with excitement. Someone gasped. The magnitude of what was happening was beginning to sink in. "No, Mahmoud, this is not a joke," Yusuf continued, glancing at Mariana. "I made a promise, and I intend to keep it. I need the paperwork ready within the hour. Yes, I understand the legal implications. Do it anyway." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. When he looked at Mariana again, there was something like respect in his eyes. "A house is a house," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But what you just showed us here, this gift you have, this is something money cannot buy." An elderly woman in pearls dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. A young businessman loosened his tie, suddenly feeling overdressed and overconfident. A hotel guest who had laughed at Mariana's appearance when she first sat down now found himself deeply ashamed of his earlier reaction. "I misjudged you," Yusuf continued, his voice growing stronger. "I saw only your circumstances, not your capabilities. I saw only your appearance, not your intelligence. This was my failure, not yours." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This was not the cruel entertainment they had expected. This was something much more profound. They were witnessing a public reckoning, a man confronting his own prejudices in front of dozens of witnesses. "In my culture we have a saying," Yusuf said, "the tree that bears the most fruit bows the lowest." Today, I learned what this truly means. He turned to address the crowd directly. "This woman has taught me more in 2 hours than I have learned in months. She has shown me that wisdom can come from the most unexpected places, and that true nobility has nothing to do with money or status." A young chess enthusiast who had been filming the entire game stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said nervously, addressing Mariana, "but that sacrifice sequence, the way you coordinated both queens for the final attack, I've never seen anything like it. Are you a master? Were you professionally trained?" Mariana looked at him for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Once," she said. "A long time ago." "What rating did you achieve?" the young man pressed. "What tournaments did you play?" But Mariana had already turned away. The past was the past. What mattered now was the future, and the strange turn her life had just taken. Carlos approached the table with a bottle of the hotel's finest champagne. "Compliments of the house," he said, setting down 2 crystal glasses. "For both players. That was the most remarkable chess match I have ever witnessed." As he poured the champagne, the bubbles catching the light from the crystal chandelier above, the reality of the situation began to settle over everyone present. They had come to watch a game, but they had witnessed something much more significant. They had seen judgment reversed, dignity restored, and humanity revealed in its finest form. The transformation of Sheikh Yusuf from tormentor to humbled opponent had been as dramatic as any piece of theater. But this was real life, with real consequences and real emotions. The crowd sensed they had been part of something special, something they would remember and retell for years to come. Outside the hotel, the story was already spreading across social media platforms. Videos of the final moves were being shared and analyzed. Chess forums were buzzing with speculation about Mariana's identity. The hashtag #JanchChessMiracle was beginning to trend. But inside the salon, time seemed suspended. Mariana sat at the marble table, surrounded by the remnants of a game that had changed everything, while around her, the world prepared to welcome her back from the shadows where she had been forced to hide. The next morning arrived with a crispness that seemed to mirror the clarity Mariana had found in her life. She stood outside a small cafe 3 blocks from the hotel, her worn jacket pulled tight against the cool air. The same clothes that had marked her as an outsider yesterday now felt like a temporary costume she would soon shed. At exactly 10 o'clock, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. Behind him, Sheikh Yusuf emerged from the passenger seat, his usual commanding presence somehow diminished in the daylight. "Ms. Santos?" The lawyer approached with professional courtesy. "I'm James Mitchell, Mr. Rahman's attorney. Shall we proceed inside?" The cafe was nearly empty at this hour, just a few early customers nursing their morning coffee. Mitchell selected a corner table, spreading documents across the surface with practiced efficiency. Yusuf sat across from Mariana, his hands folded, studying her face as if trying to understand how he had misjudged her so completely. "The property deed for 247 Maple Street," Mitchell announced, sliding a thick packet toward her. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, fully furnished. "Mr. Rahman has also instructed me to include an additional sum." He placed a bank check beside the deed. $50,000 to help with your transition. Mariana stared at the papers. The numbers and legal language swam before her eyes, not from confusion, but from the sheer unreality of the moment. 24 hours ago, she had been sleeping in a doorway. Now she held the key to a house she owned outright. "I need you to know," Yusuf spoke quietly, his voice stripped of yesterday's arrogance, "that I am deeply ashamed of how I treated you. My behavior was inexcusable." She looked up from the documents. "You kept your word. That counts for something." "Keeping my word is the minimum. I owe you much more than that." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I built my fortune by reading people quickly, making snap judgments about their value. Yesterday, I was completely wrong. Not just about your chess ability, but about your character, your dignity, your worth as a human being." Mitchell cleared his throat diplomatically. "If you could sign here, Ms. Santos, and here." He indicated signature lines throughout the deed. Mariana picked up the pen, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to change everything. Her signature, written carefully in her neat handwriting, made her a homeowner. Each letter felt deliberate, important. When she finished, Mitchell stamped the documents with an official seal. "Congratulations," the lawyer said, handing her a set of keys. "The house is yours." The keys were warm in her palm. Real metal, real weight. Not a dream or a chess problem to be solved, but tangible proof of a new beginning. She closed her fingers around them, feeling their edges press against her skin. "There's something else," Yusuf continued. "I've been thinking all night about what happened, about who I was in that room, and who I want to be going forward. You taught me something important yesterday, though I doubt that was your intention. What was that? That respect isn't something you can buy or inherit or demand. It has to be earned, and it can be lost in an instant. I lost mine yesterday, in front of everyone who matters in my business world. But watching you, how you handled yourself with such grace under pressure, showed me what real dignity looks like. Mariana folded the deed carefully, creating neat creases. We all make mistakes. The question is what we learn from them. I want to do better, not just with you, but with everyone. I've spent years dismissing people I thought were beneath me, and I wonder how many brilliant minds I've overlooked, how many opportunities for genuine connection I've wasted. The cafe's morning rush was beginning. Young professionals hurried in for their caffeine fix. Mothers with strollers claimed tables near the window, and the normal rhythm of the day established itself around their quiet conversation. "What will you do now?" Yusuf asked. Mariana considered the question. For so long, her only goal had been survival from one day to the next. Now, suddenly, she could think beyond tonight's shelter, beyond tomorrow's meal. "I need time to process all of this," she said honestly. "Yesterday, I was homeless. Today, I own a house. That's not the kind of change a person absorbs quickly." "Of course. But I hope, when you're ready, you might consider returning to chess seriously. The world saw something special yesterday. There are coaches who would work with you, tournaments that would welcome you back. The idea felt both exciting and terrifying. Chess had been her first love, then her greatest disappointment when she walked away from it for what seemed like a more practical life. The game that had once defined her had become the tool of her redemption. "Maybe," she said. "Right now, I just want to see my house." Mitchell packed his briefcase efficiently. All the utilities are active, and there's a small grocery allowance included for the first month, Mr. Rahman insisted. Yusuf stood, then hesitated. "Ms. Santos, I know I have no right to ask this, but would you consider staying in touch? Not because I want to ease my guilt, but because I think you could teach me things about life that my business education never covered." Mariana studied his face, looking for any trace of the cruel man who had humiliated her yesterday. She saw only genuine remorse and something that might have been hope. "We'll see," she said. "Like I said, I need time." "I understand completely." They walked outside together, where the sedan waited. Yusuf gave his driver an address, and they rode in comfortable silence through neighborhoods that grew progressively more modest as they moved away from the city center. When they stopped in front of a small but well-maintained house with a blue front door and a tiny garden, Mariana felt her breath catch. "This is really mine?" "Every board, every nail, every flower in that garden," Yusuf confirmed. She walked up the front path alone, the keys solid in her hand. When she turned the lock and pushed open the door, sunlight streamed through clean windows into a living room with comfortable furniture and books on the shelves. It smelled like possibility and new beginnings. Behind her, she heard the sedan drive away, leaving her alone with her thoughts and her dramatically altered future. For the first time in years, Mariana Santos owned something more valuable than the clothes on her back. She owned hope and the space to rebuild not just her life, but herself. 2 years flowed by like water through cupped hands, carrying away the bitterness and leaving something precious behind. Mariana stood in the main room of her chess school, watching 12-year-old Carlos move his bishop with the same careful precision she had once used against a sheik's arrogance. The converted warehouse buzzed with concentration from 20 students bent over their boards, some in school uniforms, others in the worn clothes of the streets. "Check," Carlos announced, his voice trembling with excitement. His opponent, a girl named Sophia from the private academy across town, studied the board with narrowed eyes. Mariana had paired them deliberately, the homeless boy who slept in shelters against the daughter of a judge. Chess made them equals. Chess always told the truth. "Very good, Carlos," Mariana said, moving between the tables. "But remember what we practiced about endgames. Think 3 moves ahead, not just one." The boy nodded, his face serious with the weight of learning. He had been coming for 8 months now, ever since she started the free programs. His improvement amazed everyone, including himself. Last week, he had beaten 2 students from expensive chess clubs in the city tournament. The afternoon session ended with the usual ritual. Paying students packed their sets into leather cases, while the scholarship students carefully returned the plastic pieces to cardboard boxes. Mariana insisted on the same respect for equipment, regardless of its cost. Chess pieces deserved dignity, just like people. "Miss Mariana," Sophia approached as the room emptied, "my father wants to sponsor more sets for the free students. He says Carlos taught him something about judging people." "Your father is welcome to visit any time," Mariana replied. "We need more witnesses to what happens here." After the students left, Mariana climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment above the school. The space was simple but comfortable. A kitchen where she actually cooked meals, a living room with books and plants, a bedroom with windows that opened to let in fresh air. 2 years ago, she could not have imagined owning a coffee cup, let alone an entire building. The phone rang as she prepared dinner. Yusuf's number appeared on the screen, a sight that no longer surprised her. They spoke every few weeks now, their conversations ranging from business to philosophy to the weather. "Mariana, I have news." His voice carried genuine excitement. "The Chess Federation approved your tournament proposal. They will fund the homeless championship next spring." She sat down heavily, the magnitude hitting her. "They said yes. Complete sponsorship, prize money, travel expenses, professional arbiters. They want to make it an annual event." He paused. "They mentioned your story inspired the decision. Something about second chances and hidden talents." Through her window, she could see the public square where she once spent nights on benches. Now, it hosted her outdoor chess sessions every Saturday morning, drawing crowds who came to play and learn. The city had even installed permanent tables after seeing the community response. "This changes everything," she whispered. "It changes what it needs to change," Yusuf replied. "Your vision becomes reality. Homeless players from across the country will have their moment of dignity." After they ended the call, Mariana walked onto her small balcony. The evening air carried the sounds of the neighborhood, children playing, families talking, life continuing its eternal rhythm. 2 years ago, she had been invisible to this world. Now she belonged to it again. She thought about the woman who had sat at that marble chess table, desperate and broken. That woman existed inside her still, but transformed. The pain remained, but it had become fuel instead of poison. Her husband's betrayal had stolen her old life, but it had also freed her to discover who she truly was. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Carlos stood in the hallway, holding a small trophy. "I won," he said simply. "The junior championship at the community center. I wanted you to see it first." The trophy was plastic and gold paint, worth perhaps $5. To Mariana, it shone brighter than any crystal piece she had touched in that luxury hotel. Carlos had defeated kids with private coaches and expensive equipment, using only what she had taught him in this converted warehouse. "I am proud of you," she said, and meant every word. "You taught me that it doesn't matter where you start," Carlos replied. "It matters where you choose to go." After he left, Mariana returned to her balcony. The stars appeared one by one above the city, each one a distant sun lighting other worlds. She had learned to see possibility in darkness, hope in the space between moves. Her phone buzzed with a message from Yusuf. "My daughter wants chess lessons. I told her about the best teacher I know." Mariana smiled, typing back. "Bring her Saturday. We start with the fundamentals: respect, patience, and seeing the board clearly." The night deepened around her, but she felt no urge to go inside. This balcony had become her thinking place, where she planned lessons and tournaments and dreams she was still afraid to speak aloud. Sometimes she imagined opening schools in other cities, creating a network where homeless people could find dignity through the ancient game of strategy and skill. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that worth was not determined by circumstances. She had learned this truth on a marble chessboard in front of people who thought they knew everything about power and value. Now she taught it every day to children who needed to hear that their lives mattered. The woman who had once been homeless still lived inside her, but she was no longer defined by loss. She was defined by what she had built from the ruins, by the students who called her teacher, by the community that had grown around 64 squares and 32 pieces. Chess had given her everything back, but more importantly, it had shown her that she had never truly lost it all. The ability to think, to plan, to see possibilities, these had stayed with her through every cold night and empty stomach. They had waited patiently for their chance to shine again. As the city settled into sleep around her, Mariana Santos Oliveira stood on her balcony and understood the deepest truth of all. No matter how far you fall, there is always another move to make. The board is never truly empty as long as you remember how to play. Now, we want to know what you thought. From 0 to 10, what score does this story deserve?